if you both agree that the cost to parents with young children, young families, the cost of providing daycare or purchasing daycare services is so prohibitive that they don't have enough money, then why don't you do what seems to me the most effective thing that the government can do, and certainly from a conservative point of view, the most effective thing, and that is to cut taxes altogether. Because the single biggest expense that any of these families have is taxes. And I'm not just talking direct taxation through income tax or through their CPP or anything like that. I'm talking all of the indirect taxation that adds to the cost of living, sales taxes, and all of the hidden taxes.
Carbon taxes.
Well, carbon taxes, all of the hidden taxes and regulatory requirements that add to the cost of production and that are almost always, well, not almost, they're always passed on to the consumer. So to me, it's not rocket science. If you really want to help people out, cut taxes. Of course, cutting taxes means having to cut, the cost of government, which ultimately means having to cut services or reel in services. In addition to finding ways to do things more efficiently, but really the ultimate thing is you have to reduce the services that the government is providing. But just because the government doesn't provide those services doesn't mean that they don't get provided. The private sector steps in and provides the services. So this is the thing is I look at these things and these, your example of the broadband and my example of the daycare propositions from both political parties appear to be different. But when you start to scratch a little bit below the surface and you really start to think about it, you realize that there's not a whole lot of daylight between what the Liberals are proposing and what the Conservatives are proposing, other than the Conservatives saying, okay, we agree with you, Liberals. We want to do that too, but we think we could do it more efficiently.
And that's the part that makes me crazy because I'm totally on your page when it comes to cutting taxes and making government smaller. And again, here's an example. I saw in one of the newspapers this week a comment. It was a Star or something like that. When is Ontario going to start paying attention to expired license plate stickers? Now, this has been a pet peeve of mine for years. But what we've demonstrated is that the government can easily get by without the sticker program. If they couldn't, they wouldn't ignore it. So maybe there's other programs out there we could treat the same way and begin to get rid of, stop the processing of all. Think about just administering that one program. Because you got to print the stickers, you got to make new license plates, you got to print the forms out, you have to hire people to run it. There's nothing the government does that is efficient. And why bother with that? Because it doesn't make the car any safer and it doesn't make the driver any better. It's nothing more than a tax grab. So you want to end something and actually make a difference in people's lives? It cost me $120. $120 just to put a sticker on the back of my car for 1 year. That's $120 I could have spent 100 other places that would have actually been beneficial to the economy. I could have bought who knows how much sweet corn. I could have bought beer. I could have bought popcorn. I could have gone to the movies. I could have done a dozen things that where you'd actually generate wealth that they could then tax. And this is what makes me crazy about this kind of stuff is the fact that they have the answers before them. They just don't want to actually do anything about it. Just cancel that whole department. If you don't want to fire anybody, fine. Do it through attrition and retirement. But there's just, oh, man. So I put the question to our chat room folks and anybody listening on Facebook and that kind of stuff. What else could we do without that we've been forced to do without through the COVID pandemic? What else has the government turned a blind eye to that simply proves they didn't really need it in the first place? I'd be very interested to hear from our listeners on that score.
Well, that actually would be quite interesting.
I thought so, because how do there's you run down the list of services provided by the government, and it's from everything from daycare to healthcare to you ask yourself, what is this worth? And some programs are. I'm not trying to say we don't have a social safety net. I'm not trying to say that we don't have, it's a free-for-all, the Wild West. But we're nowhere near that. We blew past that mile marker a long time ago. And it's about, like, do we really need a boater's card? For the love of God, what do we need a boater's card for? How much does that cost to operate? The gun registry was another example of things we don't need. And yet here we are. As far as I know, the gun registry still exists, and it's ticking away, gobbling up dollars. So,
sorry, did you say a voter's card? V as in Victor, or boaters?
B as in Bob. B as in Bravo. Boater's card.
That's what I thought. I wasn't entirely sure.
No, we might be able. You know what? You could justify a voter's card as a form of if you don't have a voter's card or even your driver's license. It has to have you have to prove you're an actual resident of the country before you can vote. I would go along with that, but a boater's card just to prove you know how to keep from flipping a boat over. I'm sorry, I took the test. It's a joke. I mean, I got one wrong out of 50 questions, and I still don't know which one it is, and it bothers me to this day. But for the love of crying out, I mean, I'm trying to keep this family-friendly stuff in mind here. I don't want to use the language I would normally use. But what else can we get rid of?
Well, there are a lot of things we could get rid of.
Yeah.
That we don't really need.
Well, why do barbers have to get a license?
And who pays for it?
Yeah.
Well, ultimately, you pay for it through the added cost on your getting a haircut.
Or a hairstylist, for that matter. I mean, for crying out loud, he's not going to lop your head off. The worst he'll do is take the tip of your ear off. And most barbers I know, the ones I go to, don't do that because they want to see me back again. That's the best defense against this.
If you lose an ear to the barber, the private sector motivation, kicks in. And you basically go, you know what? I'm not coming back here anymore. By the way, can you hand me the tip of that ear? That's right. I only got. And can you hand me the tip of the ear off the floor there? Because I'm taking that and I'm leaving. I only have 2 ears. I'm not taking a chance on you.
That's right. I don't want to look like a Vulcan.
But here's the thing, okay? I mean, you're opening up a whole separate question about government in the whole area of licensing and apprenticeship and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And people think that somehow or other, if you are licensed by the government, that will make you more efficient, more proficient, or provide you as the consumer with more protection. And I'm trying to think of how that actually works. Because to take the barber slicing an ear off example, Nick, that's just as likely to happen if the barber is licensed or not licensed. I guess that's my point. So how does the license protect you? That's what I want to know. If you're let's take this a little further down the road, just one more rabbit hole. You walk into a doctor's office, and there's 2 documents on the wall. One is from, the Edinburgh School of Medicine, and the other one is a government certificate that says he's allowed to practice medicine in the province of Ontario. Which one is more impressive to you? Well, whatever his or her degree is. Yeah, well, it's the school he came from. Right, the school. Because that's where he learned. And if it's got a great reputation, it probably produces some pretty good doctors. So who gives a crap about the certificate from the government on the wall? They should put a little hammer with it and say, in the case of running out of toilet paper, break glass. Yeah, well, to be perfectly honest, when I think about it, when I'm in a doctor's office, I have seen the doctor will put will frame their degree from whatever medical school they went to, but I don't think that I've ever seen a framed license on the wall.
If it is not much of a frame, because it's just a document to them. But that certificate of graduation.
But it's an interesting point.
Yeah.
How many doctors? This is a question for our listeners out there, I guess, too. Have you ever gone to a doctor and seen mounted on the wall in a frame their license to practice medicine by the government agency? In this case, it would be in Ontario, the College of Physicians and Surgeons. So, they may put something up that looks kind of fancy, but other than that, why would they?
That's $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen it.
Well, and you could do the same thing in a dentist's office. It doesn't matter to me what government certificate you have on the wall. Like, I'm a certified driving instructor. Okay, I had to go take a course. I had to go learn how to teach people how to drive. I've been teaching people how to drive since I was 20. Okay, I've been driving all my life. I don't need somebody sitting behind a desk dragging me through 20 hours of dry classroom experience and then go and drive with somebody else for 10 hours to know how to teach people how to drive. But I had to get that government certificate. And I have a copy of my hard copy of my license that I'm supposed to put in the dash. Guess how many times I put it on the dash, and guess how many times people actually asked me for it over the year or so that I did that.
We're not going to go there, Nick, because we don't want to get you in trouble.
You can't get me in trouble. They never asked for it. Nobody ever said, "Where's your license to be a certified driving instructor?"
Well,
I had it in the car. I just didn't put it out because nobody cares.
It's like having a license to fly an airplane. I don't care what the government says. I want to know how many hours you have in the pilot's seat.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And how many? I want to know how many successful takeoffs and landings you've made.
You know what's even more important? How many times have you flown to the crash site? That's the question I want answered.
All right. Okay. Too much fun. We're going to go for a break. Stay with us, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back in a few minutes here.
There's
on
more
the
to come.
Nick and Joe Show on ThinkRadio.ca. Show, segment number 2, half hour number 2, and we've been talking a little bit about government and elections. And Nick, I want to go back to what we started discussing with respect to the election that we're in now, the federal election, and that is the difference between the Conservative Party, Federal Conservative Party policy proposals and the Federal Liberal Party policy proposals, and how similar they are, at the same time that, they try to pretend that they're very different. And one of the things that we actually haven't talked about for some time that I think is worth going back to, and that is the whole argument about climate change. And what has the Liberal response been to climate change, and what the Conservative response has been, and what I think you and I would agree ought to be the proper response on the part of the Conservative Party that unfortunately they haven't taken. So the Liberal response has been predominantly to implement a carbon tax in order to discourage